Okay, well, thank you for coming. Thank you for braving the weather to make it out here. I'm going to be referencing my notes just because I have so much information to cover, and I don't want to forget anything because it's all really important stuff. So, you were telling me before that your daughter suffers from ADHD.
Moderate to severe.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Actually, in prepping for this seminar, I realized that I have strong signs of ADHD as well, which was really interesting to me because I always thought I was just like scatterbrained and, just daydreamy, but it's fascinating. So, what better person to put on an ADHD seminar than someone who has it?
Yeah.
Perfect. I'm not a licensed physician. I don't prescribe medication, and I don't diagnose ADD or ADHD. I don't have any shame, blame, or judgment, either way. I believe that everybody has to live within their comfort zone. But what I do have is information about tools that can help, either in conjunction with or independent of the medication. Okay, and that is hypnotherapy. Just in case you weren't sure why you were here, you were like, hey, I thought this was the puzzle class. No, it's the hypnotherapy. So let me just tell you a little bit about myself and my journey into hypnotherapy. So my name is Abby Carruthers. Abby, I didn't put my last name on there. It's Carruthers. I actually started at a very young age knowing that I was supposed to be put on this earth to help people, to give back. When I was a really young child, I would watch those commercials, those infomercials about those starving kids in Africa, and I would cry and I would beg my mom, can we just adopt them all? Let's just go over there. I was born in South Africa, so it was pretty close. I was like, let's go pick them up. Nobody should be hungry. And luckily for me, she waylaid my plan. Said maybe not today. But I continued to really have a focus on helping people. I was the kid that started the groups and the tutoring for the younger kids in my daycare. I started the science club and the dance club, and I was always trying to find ways to entertain and engage the kids, just to help them out. And then I grew up and I became desensitized to my mission. I started focusing on regular things like getting married, having babies, having a home. And everything was going exactly according to plan until one day I woke up and I realized that I'd gotten everything that I'd ever hoped for and I wasn't happy. And I just felt a sense of emptiness and there was just devoid of passion in my life. And so I embarked on a 5-year-long journey of self-discovery and happened upon hypnotherapy just quite accidentally, actually. I was reading a book called Journey of Souls, which, oh my gosh, it's my favorite book. If you ever have an occasion, I would highly recommend it. Blew my mind wide open.
Journey of Soul?
Yes. It's actually written by a psychologist turned hypnotherapist when he realized that hypnotherapy was the fastest way to help his clients get the maximum results and improvements in their life. And just helped uncover things in their past lives. I won't go into that. I could literally talk about that whole book for 2 hours straight, so we're not even going to go there. And I just knew, and as soon as I read the book, I was like, this is it. This is it. This is what I'm here for. Because it can help the maximum amount of people, and I can create the most efficient, effective, and fastest. Let's be honest, with ADD, I don't have many patients. Well, no, not many, much. And so I was hooked. And so I started going to school. I went to school at the Hypnosis Motivation Institute, which is in Tarzana. It's actually the only accredited school for hypnotherapy in the United States. And I am just finishing up my residency program, which is why I had you sign in, because I actually get credit for doing this seminar today. Yay! And that is me. So, you may be thinking, well, how is Clucking Like a Chicken going to help my daughter focus? Right? So, it's not. I'm so glad you brought it up. Thank you, Susan. Actually, let me tell you a little bit about hypnotherapy. So, hypnosis and medical treatments can be traced back all the way back to the ancient Greek and Egypt with sleep temples. So they used to have sleep temples. The monks would stay in the sleep temples, and families would bring their sick and their dying to the sleep temples as a last resort. So the patients would go in, they would be put to sleep, which is actually they would be induced into a deep hypnotic trance. The monks would whisper spells into their ears, and they would be miraculously cured. And then they would come out, and it's a miracle. The sleep temples are, blessed, divine, etc., etc. Now we know what they were actually doing was a version of hypnotherapy, which is fantastic. Yeah. And then from then, all the way up until now, there are hundreds of documented cases of how hypnosis has been used to help people, mostly in the medical field. What's new about hypnosis currently is that now it's being used to help people have focused improvements in their life. It was never as focused, it was more generalized. It was mostly around healing. And also, what's also new is that now we have the science and technology to prove how and why it exists, which is great. Very fascinating. So, just by a show of hands, who has ever been hypnotized before? Okay. Now, show of hands. Who went to sleep last night and woke up this morning? Okay, good. Who's ever been driving on the freeway and missed your exit? Okay. And lastly, who has ever been watching a movie and then felt yourself get caught up so much that you were laughing and crying along with the characters? Yeah, definitely. So I have fascinating news for you. You have all been in hypnosis. Because what happens is that your mind goes into a focused state. And that is a light state of hypnosis. But I wasn't asleep. I wasn't clicking like a chicken. I'm so glad you brought it up. Thank you. There are 4 states of mind. So there's beta, which is how we are right now, just talking, interacting. There's alpha, which is a light state of hypnosis. It's more like a meditative state, when people go into meditation or things like that. There's theta, which is kind of that deep, dreamy feeling. There's also amnesia linked with theta. So it's, there's loss of memory. And then beta, and then delta, which is deep sleep. So every night before you go to bed, you have to pass through alpha and theta to get to delta. And every morning when you wake up, same, except in reverse. So you are in a state of hypnosis at least twice a day, if not more. Fascinating, right? Mm-hmm. So now, by raise of hands, show of hands, I don't know, something like that, who has ever been hypnotized? Yes, that's right. So when you missed your exit, like I said, you were zoned out or in a light state of hypnosis. Musicians go into a state of hypnosis. When they're playing music, writers go into a state of hypnosis when they're writing. Other times where you might...
Because they're so engrossed.
Exactly.
To just that.
Exactly. That's right. Right. So you're in a focused state of mind. And then when you're concentrating, when you're remembering, when you're thinking about something
People
that happened.
Think I'm paying attention to them, but really, I'm focused on what I'm doing.
Right. Yeah. And that is a state of hypnosis. Oh. And back to our previous question. Yes. Well, I was conscious the whole time. That is because hypnosis is a conscious state. All that hypnosis is a heightened state of awareness to allow access to the subconscious mind, putting the critical mind to sleep to create positive changes in your life. And that's a heightened state. It's not a state of sleep. So you're actually more aware. You're just focused on one specific thing. And in hypnotherapy, that thing is the sound of my voice. Right. But you can hear everything. You can remember. Unless you go really, really deep to theta, which is where there's some memory loss. But pretty much you can remember everything, and that's the point. I don't want anyone in delta sleep in my office. And it's very rare, actually, that someone will get so relaxed that they fall asleep. Because it'll take longer for my suggestions to go in.
Okay.
So I actually prefer a lighter state. So... all I need to know is some people think that they're not hypnotizable. But everybody is actually hypnotizable. And all I need to know in order to hypnotize someone is how they take in information. So let's practice. Okay. So go ahead and put down your drink.
Oh,
okay. And your paper.
All
right. And feet flat on the floor, back straight in the chair. Great. And you're going to put your arms out in front of you. Okay. Can you imagine? Can you visualize? Great. Okay. So get a good visual image of your arm from fingertip to shoulder as much as you can. And when you have a good image, go ahead and close your eyes. So all I'm going to do is such a suggestibility test. All I'm going to do is see how you take in information. It's not a test that you can pass or fail. Everything tells me a story. Okay. So imagine that tied around your right wrist are 10 helium balloons. And they're actually starting to cause a sensation of lightness in your right hand. And you might even feel that your hand goes up and up, lighter and lighter, as it continues to lift and rise. As those helium balloons lift your hand higher and higher, lighter and lighter, light as a feather, lifting up. And in your left hand, you have a boulder that's really heavy. It's 10 pounds, and it's making your arm tired as it feels heavier and heavier, and your arm starts to drop down, and your right hand continues to lift and rise, lifting and rising, up and up, higher and higher, as your left hand continues to drop down and down, lower and lower, lower and lower, even lower as your right hand is lighter and lighter, and lighter and lighter, lighter and lighter. That's right, as it lifts and rises by those helium balloons. And freeze, and open your eyes. Okay, now shake it out. And go ahead and put your hands out in front of you, palms facing up. Get a good visual image of your hands, and then close your eyes, and let's just see what happens. And freeze. I know.
I could actually feel it.
Yes.
It was amazing.
So shake your hands.
I could actually feel it.
So.
I go, it's like, oh my God, my left arm's heavy.
What's happening?
I'm holding that boulder.
What are you doing to me? Yes. So, let me tell you what I just found out about you. I found out how you take in information. So there's 3 types of suggestibility. The third type is actually a combination of both types. It's actually right in the middle. One type of suggestibility is called physical in hypnospeak. It's very direct. So that person takes in information directly. When I say your hand is lighter and lighter, light as a feather, it's lifting up, lifting up. The information is going directly into the subconscious, and the arm is just responding. And it's not that the person is trying, it's actually all operated by your subconscious, as you noticed, because you weren't doing anything, you were just letting it happen.
Right.
And then, and there's on the other spectrum, there's an emotional. And the emotional, someone who takes in inferred suggestions. You usually cannot tell an emotional what to do because the emotional will say, why? That doesn't make sense. They're very logical, very analytical. They need to have all the information and then be able to make a decision themselves. And so that's what showed me by the suggestibility test, and it seems like you're more emotional than physical.
I am? Oh, wow, okay.
And then there's a somnambulist, and the somnambulists are right in the middle of physical and emotional, and they respond equally on both tests. Also, they take in a lot more information, so they're actually walking around in hypnosis most of the time because they're just overloaded. They're just taking in everything, okay? So that is that.
Okay, so what state was I in again? What?
You were an emotional suggestible.
Emotional suggestible.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. So now, in hypnosis, I would know how to feed you hypnotic suggestions so that they would go in.
Yes.
Because if I tried to do it directly, for example...
Because I noticed it didn't really move much directly.
And if I tried to give you direct suggestions while you're in hypnosis, your subconscious is going to go, nope.
Yeah,
nope.
and I was trying and it wasn't letting me. I could tell.
Yeah. Oh, interesting.
Like my brain wasn't relaxed. It wasn't... It wasn't ready.
Right. Those signals were just not going in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Okay, so let me
interesting.
tell you a little bit about a theory of mind. So this is how the mind works. Okay.
Mhm.
So your mind is here. And this is the primitive area of mind. Everybody has this. Everybody's born with it. We're also only born with 2 fears. That's the fear of loud noises and the fear of falling. Every other fear is learned, which is fantastic news because that means it can be unlearned.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So in our primitive mind, we actually only have 2 instinctual responses, which you've probably heard of. That is fight and flight. So back in the ancient caveman times, it was how we responded to a threat to our livelihood, our lives.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we could either fight it and live to see another day, or
Right.
we could run away. There was actually a third option. It was called freeze. Those people became lunch. So these are the people whose DNA actually continued to move forward. So now right now, we'll have to do the suggestibility test in a minute
Oh,
for you
wow.
too. I have another
That
one I
was
can do.
cool. You missed
Yeah.
it. Oh, darn.
So fight is now the way that we react to the stresses of everyday life. So that would usually be anxiety. And then flight is what happens when that gets too great, which is depression. Between the ages of 0 and 8, we are very suggestible. We take in everything. Everything we're exposed to becomes an association in our minds. We have positive associations and we have negative associations. In hypnospeak, we call them knowns. Okay? So a positive association would be, I like cake. A negative would be, I don't like spinach. That's me. You might like spinach. No, I don't. Positive would be, I like hugs and kisses. A negative association would be, I don't like being kicked or spanked. Okay? So this is all in our subconscious mind still, and then between the ages of about 8 to 14, we develop what's called a critical mind because we can't take in information all our lives. We can't take in everything, otherwise our brains would explode. There's simply not enough room. So then we develop a critical mind, which becomes our filter. Now what the critical mind does is it actually protects these associations, i.e. traps them in there for all of eternity, and it filters all incoming information. Okay? This is our subconscious mind. It makes up 88% of our total mind power. Then we have our conscious mind up here. It's 12%. It's logic, reasoning, analyzing, decision-making, and willpower. The one that doesn't work when we want it to, right? So, you have a thought. Okay. Let's say that thought is, I would like to have more focus and concentration. Thought comes in, stops at the critical mind. The critical mind goes, whoa, 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 whoa. This is a new thought. I have to check with the subconscious and see what's going on. I don't know. So, filters down the subconscious, and the subconscious goes, more concentration. That sounds like hard work. This is how I've survived up until now, and I've been just fine. I don't even know what that looks like. I wouldn't know where to start. I am perfectly comfortable where I am. No, thank you. Kicks that thought out. So, what hypnosis does is basically creates a pathway through this critical mind so that we can get in here and turn some of these negatives to positives. So, I work with the 88%. My clients work with the 12%, and then together we have a 100% effective rate. And let's go ahead and do another suggestibility test,
Okay.
just for fun.
Let's
So,
see if I don't know.
okay, yeah, absolutely. And comfortable, so feet flat on the floor, back straight against the chair. And a suggestibility test just shows me how you take in information. It's not a test that you can pass or fail. There is no right or wrong. Everything tells me a story. Okay, so go ahead and just hold your hand a little bit higher than your head with your elbow kind of in front of your chest. Yeah. And then squeeze your fingers together and your thumb too. Okay, good. And stare at your middle finger. And in a moment, you may notice that your fingers will start to separate. Separating, wider and wider, further and further apart. Separating, wider and wider, further and further apart, separating, separating, wider and wider, further and further apart, separating, separating, wider and wider, further and further apart, separating, separating, wider and wider, further and further apart. Good. Okay, and put it down, shake it out. All right, and then other hand. And so a little bit higher, elbow right in front of your chest, fingers tight together, stare at your middle finger, and let's just see what happens. Okay, good. Thank you. Very interesting. There was less movement on that one, I noticed, than the first one. Did you notice your fingers moving at all? I didn't see it from here. It looks like...
No, because then I kept getting focused on you, and then I was like,
no problem. That's very awesome. Okay, awesome. Thanks for playing, guys. All right, so now let's go into statistics. So that is a lot of hypnosis stuff. So let's talk more about... I'm going to sit down if you don't mind. Seeing as this is very casual, I'm going to move this. There we go. Hi. Okay, cool. So, scary thing about ADD and ADHD statistics is that 1 in 10 of our kids in schools have ADD and ADHD. 60% of them will actually carry the symptoms through to adulthood. Great news is that by 25 you've actually grown out of the disorder, but you may still continue to have some signs and symptoms because you've never learned how to overcome the challenges that actually come along with ADD and ADHD. So even though many adults think they have ADD, it's just because they've never actually learned any ways of dealing with the common symptoms until this time. So a little bit about the science behind ADD and ADHD. So we all know that our brains are our control centers, right? It's where we organize information. It's where we make decisions. We control the rest of the body in our brains. And message units travel on something called neural pathways, okay? So neural pathways, let's just say they're that big. And with ADD and ADHD, they're actually behind. So sometimes they don't go all the way through. Sometimes they're just not as developed. And so the information has challenges getting all the way through the brain. Also, what happens with neural pathways is they're constantly changing, which is fascinating to me because you can actually, I don't know if you guys have heard that you have the most neural pathways, the most connections in your brain when you're 5 years old, and after that they start to diminish. And that's because the more you use your neural pathways, the stronger and wider they become, and the less you use them, the narrower they become. You can create new neural pathways by learning new information, and you can lose neural pathways by discontinuing a certain type of behavior, right? So when we're talking about neural pathways, we're talking about an actual physiological something that's happening in the brain that's preventing people with ADD and ADHD from functioning at a desired level, let's say, because there's no normal. Normal doesn't exist. But there is, an optimal level of desired functioning. So they're approximately 2 years behind in development. So people with ADD and ADHD frequently have said that being in a regular, like having ADD and ADHD is similar to being in a Las Vegas casino and trying to do complicated multiplication problems within a time limit. So it's really, really, really stressful. It's too much going on. It's really hard to focus, right? So if you think about the amount of information that we are subjected to every day, it's something like 92,000 pieces of information. But our brains have learned how to filter out the stuff that we don't need, it's not important to us, and focus on the stuff that is important to us. Well, the ADD, ADHD brain has not learned to do that. And so they are continuously bombarded with all of this information all day long. It's exhausting, right? Yeah, so some of the challenges, which may sound familiar to you, would be Organization of information, executive function, which I'll explain in a moment, concentration and focus, beginning, executing, and completing tasks, self-regulation, impulse control, and relationships, right? Yeah. Sounds familiar.
Huge
Yes.
for her.
It is one of the biggest challenges, absolutely. So some of the common signs and symptoms are when at home, work, or school, the mind wanders away from tasks that are difficult or uninteresting. Reading is difficult unless the text is very interesting. In groups, it's hard to pay attention to what is being said. You may have a shorter temper, a shorter fuse, often get irritable or upset by minor things, can do or say things without thinking and then later regret them, makes quick decisions without thinking through consequences. Relationships can be challenging as you may not be aware of how your behavior affects others. Trouble planning what needs to be done in order to begin, execute, and complete a task or project. Always on the go, uncomfortable sitting still. In conversation, often interrupts or answers a question before the other person has time to finish. Works on many projects at a time but fails to finish some, many, or all of them. Lots of chatter or static in the mind. In group activities, it's hard to wait your turn. Feeling like the mind is a television with all the channels going at once. Disorganization at homework or school. Careless mistakes at homework or school, and constantly forgetting tools like books, computer, homework, forms, lunches, jacket that are needed for the day's task.
It's almost every one of these.
Right. Absolutely. And that's totally normal.
Yeah.
And adult challenges can be low self-esteem due to, in school, being always labeled as lazy or stupid, and difficulty staying on task, difficulty, finding a task and completing it all the way through, and then also troubled relationships because people, because the impulsivity can sometimes be mistaken as insensitivity, and that can create trouble in relationships. So, the most successful adults and children have learned the following techniques that I'm going to talk about. Now, I was going to have a break, but I kind of don't really feel like, unless you need one, I'm just going to go straight through. Okay, cool. You may be on overload by the end of this day, but that's okay. That's why I made a handout for you to take home.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So, the key for adults is executive functioning. It's learning how to take a challenge, create a solution, make a plan, and execute the plan from start to finish. And it begins in childhood, but this is key for adults who suffer from the signs and symptoms of ADHD. So identifying a problem can actually be really challenging. It can be challenging for a regular person, but for someone with attention deficits, it can be even more challenging. Because let's say that you guys are hypnotherapists, and I come to you and I say, I'm having real trouble finishing my work, or my paperwork at work. And initially, that sounds like the problem. Sounds like I'm having trouble finishing my paperwork. But why am I having trouble? What's going on while I'm doing my paperwork that's creating this challenge for me to not be able to complete it? Am I in an environment that's too distracting? Are people trying to engage with me while I'm doing my paperwork? Do I have anticipatory anxiety around the paperwork, and therefore whenever I think about doing the paperwork, I go into freeze mode? It could be anything, so identifying the problem is number one. You have to figure out what's going on in order to come up with a solution. But good news is once you have a solution, it's really, really straightforward because it usually presents itself. So for example, let's say that in a previous example, the reason I'm not finishing my paperwork is because there's too many distractions. Okay, well, my solution would be do my paperwork in an environment where there are no distractions, right? So, easy solution once you know what the problem is. Making a plan. It's much more straightforward once you have the solution. So, maybe my plan would be, well, I can go to the conference room at 4:30 every day with my paperwork where I know I won't be disturbed, and with focus and concentration, it'll take me 30 minutes. Okay? And then executing the plan all the way through to resolution. This is the hardest part. This is the most challenging because this is where you have to put rubber to the road. This is where you have to find out if you can use the conference room. Is it available? Do you have to get permission? What things do you need to bring with you in order to complete your paperwork in the conference room? Is 30 minutes going to be enough time? So you have to be able to take the plan to resolution and then allow for changes, because it has to be as realistic as possible. If you're not setting yourself up with a realistic plan, you're setting yourself up for failure, equals frustration, equals this doesn't work for me, I can't do it, I'm broken, right? So it needs to always be very realistic as possible. And then for adults, keeping lists, ideas, and goals and plans are imperative for the ADD brain. Lists are so helpful just to keep you organized. So let's talk about children. So children challenges is that they're easily distracted by stimuli not connected to the task that the teacher has given them. And the classroom is a really hard place for kids to be anyway, let alone with the added, challenges of attention deficits. So another way to think about it would be that it's like asking a kindergartner to sit for the same length of time as a third grader and pay attention. It's unrealistic. It's not going to happen, right? So they're easily distracted. Sustaining mental effort can result in problems with completing assignments in a timely manner due to quitting when the work is challenging or uninteresting. Because usually, we're faced with something that's not interesting. I just got to do it. With the ADD brain, it's not interesting. Next. And then some students have the added challenge of needing perpetual motion. They like to stand up, they like to tap their pencil, bother the kids next to them, shout. They also can have diminished social skills because they don't stop themselves from grabbing, cutting in line, pushing, waiting their turn, speaking out of turn, not letting other people talk. And many also have a very low tolerance for stress and frustration. 30% of people with ADD or ADHD actually suffer from anxiety as well. So, tools to help them. And these are conscious tools. These are things that you can actually implement starting today. I would highly recommend that you only introduce one or two at a time, because then you'll, if you try to do everything all at once, you'll overload yourself and you'll overload your child, and everybody will just end up frustrated. Mm-hmm. So the number one thing is eliminating screen time or having a maximum of 30 minutes per day. This includes computers, handhelds, cell phones, TV, video games, a maximum of 30 minutes a day. And that is because the TV, all of these technological gizmos have flickering lights. And when something is flickering, it's creating many, many, many points of distraction all at one screen. So what it's doing is it's actually further distracting them and disorganizing their brain. It's actually detrimental to their progress. It's going to go against everything that you've been doing. So that is the number one. Number two is lots of outdoors activities. And definitely do things that they enjoy, because through doing those things, it's going to raise their serotonin levels, bring down their cortisol levels. Cortisol is the anxiety hormone. And they're going to be able to be more calm and relaxed because they'll be exhausted, right? And
there's not much that exhausts this kid.
Amazing. And teach very clear rules, okay? And there is a method to teaching the rules. And you teach one rule at a time. And so you state the rule clearly. I will keep my hands to myself. You always do it in a positive way, because the subconscious doesn't hear negatives. It doesn't hear don't. So don't touch others to the subconscious registers as touch others. We don't want that. So we always phrase it in a positive way so that the subconscious can have something to grab onto that's actually beneficial. So I will keep my hands to myself. And then you have the child restate the rule. I will keep my hands to myself. And then we engage them. We ask them, what does that rule look like? What does following that rule look like? Well, and let the child think, well, keeping my hands to myself looks like me sitting at my desk, not touching my friends, not grabbing their papers, having my hands on my lap, just sitting still. That's what keeping my hands to myself might look like. Or anything, any variation of that. And feel free to prompt, but don't answer the question for them. Let them engage. Let them use their brains to figure it out. And then why is the next thing. Or you can do it the other way around. Why do we keep our hands to ourselves? Well, this is my property. That's not my property. It's not nice. It's not friendly. It's not kind to touch other people, to push other people, to take their papers. It's not nice. And I wouldn't like it if someone did it to me, you know. So the why question. And then always follow that up with, is this an always rule or a sometimes rule? The answer is always going to be always. But we want them to come up with that themselves. Because what we're doing is we're engaging their conscious mind, and we need to do it on a consistent basis. So, another tip or trick is once you've taught these rules, remind. Play this game every single time you're about to go into a problem situation. Okay? So one of those ways would be school, when you're about to go to school. Okay, get there 10 minutes early if necessary and sit in the car. Let's run through the rules. So what's a rule? I will keep my hands to myself. Great, I will keep my hands to myself. Why do we do this? Child answers. What does this look like? Is this an always rule or a sometimes rule? Always. Excellent. All right, what's another rule? I will listen when the teacher talks. Okay, what does that look like? Why do we do this? Is this an always rule or a sometimes rule? You go through each problem area and just do this reminding game, the rules game. However you want to reframe it to make it an activity, but the more exposure that your child has to this, to the rules, the more and more it's going to go into their subconscious mind. And what we're doing is we're strengthening these neural pathways so that when they're in the moment, the information has more likelihood to travel down the neural pathway. Wait a second, we've been doing this for like 2 weeks in a row. I know this. What is it? Oh yeah, I'm supposed to keep my hands to myself. Why? Oh yeah, because, you know, so that is that. Also, have very clear, stated rewards and consequences. Okay? The rewards and consequences must come immediately after the action. One of the challenges that children with ADD, ADHD have is that they don't have logical consequences. They don't understand that doing this equals that. They don't understand how their behavior affects others. So it doesn't make sense. So that's why if you get a note from the teacher and then the consequences, okay, well, you know, no TV for today, or you have to sit in timeout, or you're grounded for tonight, it's going to be ineffective because there's no logical consequences. She hasn't done anything to deserve this behavior, so clearly you're just being mean, right? So the action or the consequence or reward must come immediately after the behavior. In school, it's going to be a little tricky. Also, a really great tip for school is have them sit front and center. That way they don't have the rest of the students in front of them being distracting. They are front and center, so everything else is behind them. All they have is their teacher in front of them. Okay? Allow them to gain self-esteem through mastery. So every time we do something that shows us that we have control over our bodies, we get a pump of dopamine into our brains, and that raises our self-esteem level. Okay, so teaching our children to function for themselves, dress themselves for school, wash themselves, maybe getting ready for their school day. It's all increasing their self-esteem through mastery. It's showing them, I know you can do this. I have faith in you. Let's figure out a plan so we can have this done. And then using timers and charts to help them learn how to keep themselves on track. It's really great. Something that's visual for them so they have a clear, measurable thing. Then a big one is teaching them social cues. So there are many different ways that we can do this. A couple of suggestions would be to teach them how to recognize when people are mad, sad, angry, happy. And you can do this with real pictures of real children in real situations. And you can just play a game where, okay, what is this child doing? What is she playing? Or he playing? What do you think they're feeling right now? How do you think they're feeling? Great. If you wanted to play with them, what could you say? So teaching them how to observe, how to just watch, rather than going right in there and see what the child is playing, and then ask to join in a specific way. So, may I help you dig that hole in the sand, or can I play tag too? I'll be it. Or, which would be great for the energy. And I like your track. Can I put my car on it? Something that's really helpful is teach the child how to listen for stop words. And those words would be, like quit it, or stop it, or don't do that, leave me alone, get away.
I hear that all day.
So when a stop word is recognized, and it's going to take practice, and that's okay. When a stop word is recognized, have the child freeze, take a step back, take a deep breath in, calm their body, and then re-engage or stop playing again by using their words, how they started playing in the first time. Okay, so establish rules for playing games, like taking turns, being a good loser and a bad loser. And then one way that you can practice engaging all of these lessons on social cues would be to do mutual storytelling. Okay, so you just sit down, and it can be something that you do every day. Just pick a different scenario, like, okay, so Bobby, or, T-Rex, whatever your child is most into, because that's going to be the most effective. So Bobby sees a child playing in the sandpit. And so first Bobby observes the child playing, sees what they're doing. They're digging a hole. And then Bobby uses her words to ask how to play. And then what do you think Bobby might say? And then let the child engage. Well, Bobby might say, can I help you dig that hole? Great. That's right. She might say that. And so Bobby's digging the hole, and she's having a grand old time, and all of a sudden she flicks the sand with a spade, and it seems really fun. Sand goes high, and it lands everywhere, and it's so interesting how it separates, so she starts flicking sand. And then, all of a sudden, the child who she's playing with says, Bobby, stop that! It's getting on me! I don't want sand on me! What should Bobby do? Well, Bobby should stop. Okay, good. She should take a step back. Yes. Take a deep breath. Calm her body and use her words to stop playing. I'm so sorry that I got that sand on you. Is it okay if I still play with you? Okay, so that would be an example of how to actually engage children and teach them these social cues through mutual storytelling, through something that they can actually understand and identify. Okay, next one. Another big one, impulsivity. This is one of the biggest reasons why kids get into trouble, because they have because of the lack of logical consequences, and there's not much time between the desire and actually doing the thing that they have the desire to do. So what we are going to focus on doing is lengthening the gap between desire and action. All right? So one of the ways that we can do this is have the child get in touch with a feeling in their body that they had when they did something impulsive, which led to very, very serious negative consequences. Okay? So an example might be, I stuck my foot out when my sister was playing. She tripped and broke her wrist. Okay? So that led to very serious consequences. And so have them locate before they did that activity, what was the feeling that they were feeling, because everybody feels something before they do something wrong. Kids have an innate sense of right and wrong. Kids with ADHD don't know how to yet lengthen the gap between wanting to do something and actually doing that thing. So locating the feeling in the body, like maybe it's in the stomach, or maybe it's in the chest or the throat or the head. So locating it, okay, and have them just sit with that feeling for a moment, and then go freeze, take a breath. Think of the word calm. Just think of it. It's calm. And now make a good choice. Okay? And this is something that can definitely be lengthened in hypnotherapy, but this is a cognitive activity that can be done, a cognitive practice. And so you can actually take examples that have happened where impulsivity has led to consequences, and you know them. You can take your child back to that moment. Where's that feeling? When you feel that feeling, freeze. Take a breath. Think the word calm and make a good choice. So what would a good choice have been in this situation? Let them answer it. You're not necessarily, you may or you may not get immediate results. It may take practice. It may take work. We've got to widen these neural pathways so the information starts going down them. That's going to take some time. But it'll definitely help. And then for children who are 12 and up, we want to focus on establishing a vision of who they want to be. We want to prepare them for independence. Children need to celebrate their uniqueness and make a plan for their challenges. So these are proven techniques. Organize schoolwork by color coding each subject. Create a list of tasks, and that's for the child to create a list of tasks that need to be done the next day before they go to bed each night. And the reason that we do it right before bed is because there's a magical period of time called the Magic 30. Mm-hmm. It's 30 minutes before bed where all of those suggestions that you're doing, anything that you're writing, because writing is an ideomotor response, it's actually directly linked to your subconscious. So when you write within 30 minutes before bed, as soon as you fall asleep, all of those message units go directly into your subconscious. So that's why we do it right before bed. And then check off each one as it's completed. And then review and practice muting distracting noises and spotlighting work, which is basically, it's a hypno tool. And then an activity that you can use to teach children how to plan for the future is to start with a simple task of baking a cake from beginning to end. So you can have them find a recipe online, make a list of ingredients. You can take them to the store, and then you come back, and then they mix all the ingredients up. They set the timer, put the cake in the oven, bring it out, so it's an actual physical activity that they have done all by themselves from start to finish, and that is going to not only show them, without telling them, that they can do these things. They can do these things for themselves, but it's also going to give them power and control. It's going to give them independence. It's going to raise their self-esteem through mastery. So it's going to be really, really, really beneficial for them. And if they forget the list at home and therefore forget a key ingredient, don't point it out. Don't make a point of saying it. Let them figure out what's missing. They may be mixing. When they're like, eggs. Oh, wait a minute, where are my eggs? Did I forget eggs? And mom says, or dad says, let's go back to the store. We'll get some eggs. So another key is to plan lots of time. You may be spending a lot of time on this activity, and that's okay because it's really, really important. It's going to make a big difference to them. And then 30% of all people suffer from who suffer from ADD and ADHD have anxiety. So, basically, one of the easiest ways that we can teach them to release that anxiety is to locate where it is in their body when they feel that anxiety. Some people feel it here. Some people feel nauseous. Some people feel like their chest constricting or maybe tightness in their throat or something here. Find out for them where they feel their anxiety. And when they start to feel it, have them breathe in and then think the word calm or say the word calm, and they can do that as many times as necessary until they have calmed down. What you're doing is you're interrupting the physiological cycle that's happening when the body goes into anxiety. So you're pausing it, so there's room for more information to come in past the anxiety. And then through breathing and thinking calm, as you think calm or write calm or maybe just trace it on your leg, you are sending messages to your subconscious mind, which is sending messages to your body. You're slowing down your heart rate. You're slowing down your breathing. Everything is coming back into sync. So it's actually a cognitive tool that will be very, very useful on overcoming anxiety, and I use it all the time.
I have a teenager she gets pretty bad anxiety, so I'm going to use that technique.
Great.
with her.
Yes, it'll be
My
very,
teenage
very
daughter.
helpful. And with a teenager, you can actually teach her how to breathe. Have her breathe from the diaphragm, because breathing is very different. Most of us breathe from here. Because we're just, we just don't have time to breathe all the way. But when you breathe through the diaphragm, you actually breathe in your stomach first. You go. And the reason that you do that is because the lower lobes of the lungs take in more oxygen in the lungs. And so when you're not even using the lower lobes, you're getting oxygen, but you're definitely not getting enough. Your brain is not getting enough oxygen. You've moved into a state of fight or flight, which is exactly what anxiety is, because your body is perceiving a life-threatening situation. So you stop, breathe, and then for teenagers, you can breathe out on the word calm. Just breathe out thinking the word calm, so calm. And have her do it 5 or 6 times. And then what you can do is ask her, like from 1 to 10, how high is your anxiety right now? And then do the exercise. And then from 1 to 10, how high is it now? And more than likely, it will have lowered at least 2 or 3 notches. Okay, so finally, tie it all together. The hypnosis and the ADHD. How can hypnotherapy help? The first most obvious way is that we take all of the tools, all of the cognitive tools, and we reinforce them in hypnotherapy, in hypnosis. So what that means is all of these cognitive tools that we went over are being implanted directly into the subconscious while they're in hypnosis. So it's creating, having the effect more quickly of widening these neural pathways and creating, often immediate results. Even if they're small, you can see some immediate improvements. Yes, you get a tape. So you can listen to your tape, or your child can listen to your tape every single day. And what that's going to do is reinforce all of those messages that we're putting into the subconscious mind. Hypnosis is like a muscle. The more you use it, the more you practice it, the better it gets. And the only side effects of hypnosis are increased well-being and self-control and happiness. So that's really great. Which is awesome. And so there's no negatives associated with hypnosis. We can also train the brain how to block out those unnecessary pieces of information. So we can actually start rewiring the brain so that it starts to block out some of the information that we don't need, so that it starts to become less and less like a Vegas casino. And we do this with the Hypno Remote. So we have a remote where the child actually carries it wherever they go, and if they need to focus on the teacher, they can press the mute button, which mutes out all the surrounding distractions. They can press spotlight, which puts a spotlight on the teacher or their work or whatever they need to focus on. We can put a dimmer switch to turn down the lights, other cool stuff like that. And then we can raise self-esteem, because a lot of times self-esteem is lower because everybody else can do it, why can't I? I'm broken, So there's a lot of negatives that get stored in that subconscious mind as associations, which we can start to desensitize and raise self-esteem up. And we can create visions of success. So we can have them picturing themselves in a problem area and have them picture themselves doing the thing that is more desirable, doing the action that's more desirable. Fascinatingly enough, the subconscious mind does not know the difference between reality or imagination. And so when you have visualizations, you're still creating associations in the mind. And that's why it's so effective, because you're creating knowns so that the subconscious gets more and more used to something. When it's not used to something like new information, it just kicks it right out. But the more, you can visualize yourself doing the right thing, then the more effective it's going to be. And that's it. Do you have questions?
Could this also be like considered, like a lot of times you see with treating ADHD behavior therapy?
It can be, absolutely.
So it kind of sounds similar.
It's definitely a combination. The American Health magazine did a fascinating study on types of therapy and the effectiveness. What they found was after 600 sessions, psychoanalysis had a 38% effective rate, which is a lot of sessions for a little bit of results. Behavioral therapy, strictly behavioral cognitive therapy, after 22 sessions had a 72% effective rate. And hypnotherapy, after 6 sessions, had a 93% effective rate.
Awesome. I like to hear.
Yes. So, and that's not to say that everything can be, modified in 6 sessions, but it was a clinical study, so...
I would think it would be almost even a lifetime thing that
You
they
would
have to want to continue.
Right. And you know what? With ADD and ADHD, it's going to be a lifetime thing. However, the more tools that they have, the more easy it's going to be able to cope with the challenges.
Which is what I want to teach her.
Yeah,
Want her to
absolutely.
learn.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions?
No.
Awesome. Yeah, I know. We did all.
Interesting.
Yeah, fascinating. I love this stuff. It's